Welcome to Birth in Focus. Today I'm joined by my former client, now friend, Jacqui. I'm so excited to have her here and to share parts of her story with you. So Jacqui, before we get started, is it true that you have a matching tattoo with your birth photographer?
I just might. Yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
I love it. It was so fun doing that. So unexpected,
Yeah.
especially from you, but it was fun.
Is it so weird? Is it strange to, obviously when you hired me to be your birth photographer, you never imagined getting a tattoo with me someday?
No, like a friendship forming out of, the, client,
photographer
relationship. Yeah, that was not expected. So.
Yeah.
But it's nice. It's a nice surprise.
It's been so good.
It has.
I love it. Okay, well, before we really jump into your story, why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, so I'm Jacqui. I'm married to Eric. We've been married for 19 years now.
Gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah, so long. I have two boys that Samantha documented their births for, which was great.
Yes.
And yeah, I don't know. What else would you like to know?
Well, I mean, we're going to really dive into a few more details here in a second. But I just have to say, it blows me away every time you tell me how long you guys have been together. Because I'm just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
How are we old enough to have even been together that long?
Well, that
for starters,
when you get married super young.
Yeah.
So, I've known him, since I was 11.
Gosh.
And he was 16. He was my brother's friend. So friendship at first, he graduated, was gone, and then came back into my life. And then it was just, we've been together ever since. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
So also, as the girl who introduced me to romance books and romantasy, can we just talk about the fact that you have this whole a brother's best friend trope thing going on? Is that the right word? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, and it's funny though because when we were younger, he was just my brother's friend. It was nothing yeah, he's cute, but it was just,
You didn't have this little girl crush on him your whole life?
I think everybody did.
Yeah.
But like I said, once they graduated, he's 5 years older than me. He went off and did his thing and I was doing my thing as, a teenager going through high school or whatever, graduated. And then it was, let's get up with him. My friend and I, we were having my birthday party. And I didn't think he would come to it because it was just, let's just call him. And he came over and it just, we clicked on a different level beyond just a friendship, before.
Yeah.
And so it worked out because my family has known his family for so many years. His younger sister and my older brother were really good friends because they're the same age. So it just, there was no trying. We already knew each other on that level. So we were able to build off of that friendship that was already established from years ago. And so, 7 months later, we got married. And
what?
Yeah.
So wait, 7 months after the birthday party?
Yep.
So we'll call that the start of dating, I guess, reconnecting.
Yep.
So from there to married in 7 months.
Yep.
Wow.
And then he left 2 weeks after that for the military.
Okay.
And so he did basic training, AIT, and then he deployed immediately after AIT. So the first 2 years of our marriage, we weren't really even together except for a few, bits here and there.
Yeah.
And then when he got back was when our life actually started as a married couple. We were stationed in El Paso.
Okay.
And then we went to Japan.
Ooh.
And then we came back to North Carolina. And then he was medically discharged for an injury that he sustained while he was in service. So then transitioned into civilian life, stayed in North Carolina for a bit. And then he got his job out here in Texas. And so we moved out here beginning of 2018 and have been here since.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Yep. So let's backtrack and add in all the nitty gritty details. So I know you said so you guys got married and you were separated basically, by the military for those first 2 years. So at what point did you guys decide, you wanted to start a family?
So we went into it because we were so young, we weren't like pressed to try and get pregnant immediately because I was 18 turning 19, he was 23 turning 24, you know. And then, like I said, you know, we had those 2 years of, you know, schooling and then deployment and all that stuff. So it wasn't even possible to do that. And we really took the mindset of, we're just going to let it be. And if it happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, then, you know, like we'll address that once we get to a point where we're like, you know what, we really do want to try and have a family. But my whole life, I've never had a regular cycle. So once we got to that point where we were like, you know what, we really do want to have kids. I haven't gotten pregnant thus far. You know, and they tell you try for a year. And if it doesn't happen, then go see a doctor. But you can't really try when there's nothing to track.
Right.
So, you know, like I was having a period maybe 2-3 times a year, if that.
Wow.
So I couldn't be like, oh, well, I started my period this day, you know, let's track it and do all that. So 2015, we just kind of got to that point where it was like, something is obviously going on. Something is wrong. So let's go and, you know, see what it is. And previous OBGYNs have just been like, oh, you know, like you're underweight, you know, it's probably just your hormone imbalance or whatever. So we'll just put you on some birth control and try and regulate your cycle just to see what happens with that. And that never did anything for me. It just threw me even more out of whack. So this doctor that we saw, she was like a specialist just beyond like, you know, I'm a practicing OBGYN. Like she looked into stuff further. So when I told her everything, my history, she was like, well, you don't present as someone, you know, coming into my office, I would have never said you have PCOS. She was like, but after talking to you, you are hitting a lot of those things, even though physically looking at you, I would never say that you do. So she was like, let's do an ultrasound, let's do some blood work, and let's just confirm my suspicions on, you know, what I think is going on. And she literally walked me to get an ultrasound right then. Like there was no come back in a week or two. It was, we're going to go and do this. And that's where she confirmed that I have PCOS, like so bad. And she told me, she was like, I don't think you've ever ovulated in your life. She was like, I think the periods that you have experienced are just a buildup of uterine tissue, and they have just finally shed after a couple of months. And that's what it is. And so she had me induce a period. She put me on medicine so I would have my period. And then I went back a couple of weeks later to check to see if I ovulated. And I did not. And so she was like, well, what we can do is we can get you started on, you know, just monthly medication that will, you know, stimulate that ovulation. Then we can time intercourse and we can do all that. In North Carolina, though, IVF coverage, infertility coverage is not really a thing. At that point, I don't know what it is now because that was 10 years ago. And so when those bills started rolling in, Eric and I kind of looked at each other and we were like, I don't know if I want to go in debt trying to have a baby.
Right.
So we took a step back and was like, okay, so what can we do in the meantime? Because this is just not an option financially. I was not, you know, going to put us in that situation. So we looked into, you know, like what I could do myself, diet, exercise, supplements, whatever, just to try and like regulate my system. And nothing worked. And so we were faced with, okay, where do we go from here? And so nothing against people who do fundraisers or, you know, and, you know, ask for donations for, you know, fertility treatments. We just did not feel comfortable doing that. So we took the mindset of, we're going to take a break from this. We will address it later on down the road. Cause, you know, at this point I wasn't even 30 yet. And then at that point, he actually got contacted by a guy that he was stationed with in Japan saying, hey, we have a position with this company out here in Texas. I think like you would be a good, you know, fit for it. So he applied, they flew him out, interviewed him. He got the job. That was the end of 2017. So in 2018, we moved out here. And we actually weren't supposed to stay here. His position was supposed to make us go overseas. So we were just like, okay, well, we'll, you know, do this for the next couple of years and then we'll address, you know, family building once we get back. Well, once he got here, they were like, you know what, we want to utilize you here. So then it was, okay, we need to settle down, find a place to live because we were renting. So we bought a home and looked more into his company's insurance policies to see what all they covered And we found out that here they cover everything for fertility treatments, from just doing oral medication to IVF, and not just, oh, we'll cover a couple $1,000. They covered everything.
Which is huge.
Huge. So blessed. It was just like a sign for us. Like, okay,
I'm getting goosebumps.
We're gonna do this. So I set up care with an OBGYN, kind of went over everything, and he said, absolutely, here's a list of some clinics in the area, find one that takes your insurance, all that good stuff. So we found one, did testing. They do all kinds of stuff, to make sure like my fallopian tubes were clear. That was good. They tested Eric. All of his stuff was good. And then, they were like, well, let's try oral medications with an injectable to, ovulate, timed intercourse, and we'll go from there. We did that like 3 times, failed every time. And then we had discussed IUI, but with my AMH being as high as it was, we did not feel comfortable going into the possibility of like having 4 eggs ready to be fertilized, and then, carrying a pregnancy with, triplets, or if they split and it like becomes this whole thing.
Yeah.
So we discussed with, the doctor, like, let's do IVF so it can be a little bit more controlled and not get into a situation where they would discuss, like elective reduction, which we were not for that. And then we found out, now mind you, this is 2020, so height of the pandemic and everything, I'm doing all of this by myself. We found out their lab wasn't in network with our insurance. So the doctor itself was, but the lab wasn't. And so they were like, it's going to cost, like 10 grand for just this part of it. And we were like, can't do that. We have insurance for a reason. We really like to utilize that.
Yeah.
Again, don't want to go into debt bringing a baby into the world, which is huge for us. So we looked around again and found another clinic that everything, our insurance was, they covered everything. And they are IVF MD, Dr. Raj, and he is amazing. So thankful for him. So we went to him, gave him everything, and he immediately, since I had already done all of the testing at the other place, we got in. We had our consultation with him in July, and in September we were doing our retrieval for my eggs, and so we could make, the embryos. So we did that. We got, after all was said and done, we had 9 embryos to freeze.
9 embryos, you said?
9.
9.
We had 9. So we started off with 24 eggs were retrieved, which is huge. But that's again, great. Like I said, my AMH was through the roof. He actually told me I had like the highest one that he'd ever seen. And,
wow.
Doing
hold
this.
on, look, like let's slow down for just a second. Pause. You said AMH? What is that?
I'm not going to be good at all the acronyms, but I know that it is for what your egg reserve is.
Okay.
So like they do your blood work and it tells you like a normal level, if I'm not mistaken, is like 2, 3, maybe a little bit higher. Mine was like 28. And so he confirmed what that doctor said in North Carolina, that like I probably had never ovulated on my own, which, mind blowing. And while that's awesome to have that many eggs reserved, it also goes to what's the quality of those, because they've just been sitting there. So like, yay, you got a lot, but it doesn't necessarily that you're going to, have a good outcome.
Right.
We were, so we had 24 eggs, 23, I believe, were fertilized.
Again, huge.
And then we ended up, when all was said and done, we ended up with 9 to freeze.
Okay. So from 23 to 9, did you do like, I'm guessing you did some of the like testing?
We didn't do any testing because that is not covered by insurance. That's an extra thing. So like the PGT testing that like looks for genetic abnormalities, and you can also find out the gender at that point. Yeah. We didn't do any of that.
Okay.
We were like, you know what, let's just, it is what it is. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. Yeah. We're just going to leave it in God's hands. You know,
and like, I love that because again, like obviously IVF to some degree is taking things out of God's hands, but also you can still trust in the process.
Yes.
Or trust in his divine intervention.
Yes, absolutely.
To some degree by that, not doing the genetic testing, not doing the gender testing, not being selective about your embryos and things. So I guess just to clarify, like, how did you get from the 23 fertilized to 9 embryos?
So
like, did those other ones just not grow?
Stop. Yep.
Or they
and
stopped
that's
growing?
exactly
Okay.
what they do. So like you can get, they will remove any eggs that are over a certain measurement.
Mhm.
And then at a certain point, they're considered mature, and the other ones are just, they were big, but just not mature.
Okay.
And so then they fertilize them. And we did a mix of traditional and then what is called, oh my gosh, like assisted hatching is basically what they do. Like they take the strongest sperm and like inject it into, that's not assisted hatching. I cannot remember the exact term for it. But we did a mix. So like some of them, they just dump the sperm on there. The strongest one, fertilizes it. And then the other one, they like injected it directly.
Okay. Okay. So you did like a mixture of both.
They did a mixture. Okay. And I don't know how many from each,
right. Method.
Yeah. So once they're fertilized, they watch them. And then on day 5, whatever is, has stopped growing, they discard those because obviously they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
And then they freeze the ones that are at a certain point, like they're good to go. So they freeze those. And then some clinics will watch them for another 2 days to see if any of the stragglers catch up. And I believe we had 1 or 2 that were considered like a day 7 freeze. And so from there, they freeze them, and I had to have another surgery before we could do a transfer, because through all of this, we found out that I developed polyps really bad in my uterus, which he thinks, my doctor thought that, that was probably happening because of the PCOS. I don't have a regular cycle to clean everything out. So then these polyps form. And when you develop polyps, even if you are able to, you're ovulating, everything else is working fine. If you have polyps in your uterus, no embryo is going to implant, because your body is telling you it's a hostile environment. This is not a good place for a baby to grow.
Right.
And so your body just passes it on. And so a month before our first transfer, I had to go in and just get everything cleaned out, which preps, it's extra prep for, that transfer. And so we did that, and then I started on all the medication, and we did our first transfer in November of 2020. And that was successful. We found out, like 5 days after the transfer, that baby was there. Numbers looked great. Everything was, doing what it was supposed to. Went in for our first ultrasound, saw baby on there. Heartbeat was strong, moving around. And then that night, I started hemorrhaging.
Oh my gosh.
So we went to the emergency room. They were able to do an ultrasound transvaginally, and then also, abdominally, which it's easier to see, internally.
Oh yeah, that early for sure.
Yeah.
Transvaginal or ultrasounds are the way to go.
Yep. So baby was still there. Heart rate was lower than what it was at our doctor's office. So they just said threatened miscarriage. That night I continued to bleed. We contacted our clinic first thing in the morning, went in there, and they confirmed that I had completely passed everything. So I'm thankful that I didn't have to go in and have like a DNC or have any type of medication to deal with it. But, it was devastating having to see your baby and then it's gone.
Yeah.
So that was December of 2020. Sorry.
No, you're okay.
We went home back to North Carolina, celebrated Christmas with family, just kind of recouped and, had a powwow with, what to do, where to go from here.
Yeah.
We had everything set up for another transfer for February, and then Eric got COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So then we had to cancel that, and that pushed everything back. And we had our second transfer in April of 2021, and that was like 2 days after our anniversary. And then that one just didn't work at all.
Okay.
So when I went in for my beta draw, I had been taking tests at home, so like I knew what it was going to be, but they just confirmed, it didn't work out. And so again, we had another powwow with our doctor, what do we do from here? And so he wanted to try. Go
Can
ahead.
I ask you? Yeah, real quick question before I forget. So because I'm trying to keep track here. So the first 2 transfers, how many embryos did you transfer?
We just did one.
Just one each time?
Because we had a handful of beautiful embryos because they're all graded. So you have like 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then there's an A and B, C, D following it. And so those first embryos were like 4AA, 4AB, which are really good. Some people shoot for 6, but they actually say like a really good number is like 5 or 4. And so, you know, like 4AA, 4AB, those are really good.
Great, yeah.
So, you know, those were the ones we transferred, and they did not work. And so, you know, after, you know, the miscarriage and then just a failed transfer, you know, we spoke to our doctor and he was like, I want to try a different approach. I want to do things completely different. He was like, we're going to introduce a medicine which basically just suppresses your system, basically throws you into menopause, just shuts everything down. And so that's an injectable. And I had to do that for like 3 weeks. And then once we did that, I started my period, and then we started on all the other medicine, like the progesterone and all of the other things to prep for that transfer. And, you know, going back to what we were talking about, you know, with like IVF and like the whole thing with like faith and all that stuff I felt better after having a conversation with my doctor where he said after, you know, the miscarriage and the failed transfer, going into that third transfer, he was like, I can get everything right. I can make sure everything is perfect. He was like, but if God says no, it's no.
It's no. Yeah.
There is nothing else that I can do further. He was like, so we're going to do everything we can. He's like, but in the end, it is not up to me to make sure that you have a baby at this. I'm just giving you the best shot.
Yeah.
And so that going with my faith, you know, both of us, both Eric and I, you know, like it was okay, you know, like that's, he's right. And we will do what we can, but you know, in the end, it isn't up to us. So after changing everything up, we did the transfer. It was 2 days before Eric's birthday. It was June 2nd. Yeah, it was 2 days before his birthday. We transferred one embryo, found out that it worked, which was great. Went in for that first ultrasound, and we knew at that moment that it was completely different than the first one. Heartbeat was stronger. Baby was measuring ahead as opposed to, I think the first one was like maybe like a day or so behind, but at that small, it's anything can throw it off. So that was good. Continued medication, went in for our second ultrasound, and he was much bigger than he was last time. And so at that point we graduated from the clinic and was like, you're on your own now. Like, this is it. So that was absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I was going to say that feels so wild that they like graduate you and just kind of like kick you out of the nest and they're like, okay, good luck. Go figure out your pregnancy on your own now. Bye.
Yeah. Cause you know, it was like, you know, I was in constant communication with our nurse, you know, that was taking care of like medication doses and making sure I had everything I needed and like all of that stuff. And it was like, okay, you're done. Bye. And it's like, oh no,
where do I go now? What do I do?
So we found, you know, we just went back to our OB that I had established care with before we started all of that stuff. And, you know, just kind of got a weird vibe from his staff and just, their communication wasn't the best. And it was like, okay, we got to figure something else out. And so that's when we started researching birth centers.
So before, I have so many questions. So before you guys, you know, graduated from the clinic and stuff, like, had you guys been having these sort of conversations all along? 'Cause, I mean, at this point, how far are we into your marriage, I guess? And you said this was June 2021?
2021. So we had been married at that point for 15 years.
15 years?
15 years, yeah. Yeah.
Gosh. Again, like why can my brain not comprehend this? Like I know you. I'm friends with you. Like and I still just can't.
Oh no, it's okay because I still feel like I've been married for like 2 years.
Right. Like I've only been married 5, so I'm like, how are we even friends? So, and I guess too, like I have a couple questions. So I'm gonna gonna before we
dive into pregnancy and stuff.
Yeah. Before we leave the IVF journey, I have a couple more questions. Okay. One, I guess like throughout the seasons, you know, throughout these 15 years of marriage, how are you guys doing mentally, emotionally, physically? Like, I'm sure it changed over time. Yeah. So even in my 5 years on this journey, some seasons I'm like, psh, It's fine. I don't care.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
other seasons, I can't go to church because it's Mother's Day and I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
handle it.
Yeah, and that was
So
me. Yeah.
it's a roller coaster. So
Yeah.
did you feel that
So,
same way?
For me personally, yes. Eric has always had the mindset of kids are cool if we have them, great. If not, I didn't marry you just to have a baby with you.
Right.
I married you because I want to spend my life with you.
Mm-hmm.
You are what I want. Kids are just extra.
Mm-hmm.
Me, I wanted to be a mom.
Yeah.
My entire life, that is all I ever
Yes.
wanted, was to have kids. I was that one. If there were babies around, I was holding them. I was playing with them. Always playing house. That was me. I wanted to be a mom.
So bad.
So at the beginning, when I was younger, when we were first, those first 5-6 years, it was kind of like, it was kind of hard, seeing, my friends, my family have kids and all that stuff. But again, it was like, I'm still really young.
Yeah.
It is okay that we aren't having kids yet. It's fine. And then as time goes on, and then, I get this diagnosis of you're going to struggle. You're going to have help to get this to be done. But still, there's people popping up pregnant left and right.
Well, and then too, I know you'll relate to this again, because while our ages aren't similar, we do have some similarities in our own timelines, I guess. And so with, trying for so long, you go through more than one friendship pregnancy phase.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So with you getting married at 18, 19, I'm sure there were a handful, of girls your age who were also doing the same thing and getting pregnant right off the bat.
Oh, yeah.
And then you kind of get through that first wave and then you hit your mid-20s and then there's another wave and now everybody around you is getting pregnant.
Yep.
And you make it through that phase and then you make it to the early 30s. And then you've got the next phase of the older moms that, are having their first babies.
Oh, yeah.
And then you get past that and you're like, wait a minute. How did I get left behind?
Yeah, no, it is. It's hard because when we were stationed in Okinawa, by whatever you want to call it, my best friend from middle school was stationed in Okinawa as well with her husband. Cool. And so she unfortunately suffered a miscarriage shortly before I got out there. And then I think a month or so after I got there, she ended up getting pregnant with, technically her second, but her first, earthside child. And I got to be there for her in the labor and delivery room. I was with, her through all of that.
That's the first birth I witnessed too, was my military bestie. On a military base.
It was amazing. And it was funny because after she had him, she was like, can you believe that we're on the other side of the world and you're here with me while I'm having my baby? It was so cool. So crazy. So, I got to see, and while we were there, everyone, was having babies when we were stationed over there.
Because what else is there to do when you're in the military, especially when you're stationed in Okinawa?
Yep, exactly. So
nothing else to do.
But yeah, so we were going through that. And then once Eric got out of the military and we had moved to the Charlotte area, and I was working and, of course, hearing all the, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen and all these things. And it's I know.
Big eye roll.
I know that it'll happen when it is supposed to happen. And people are like, don't think about it. Just get drunk. And it's y'all don't understand. This is almost 10 years that we've been sitting here just, whatever.
How long is enough? Because
and that's where
I'm nowhere near 10 years, but we're pushing 5.5.
Yep.
And still, I get that. Oh, it'll happen when it'll happen. You've still got plenty of time.
And
you're young. Don't worry about it.
Irritating. It is and I'm so irritating.
Yes, that's cool. You're not wrong. But also, can you validate my fears and my feelings?
Exactly.
Because I need somebody to sit with me and at least validate that my fears and concerns are valid.
And the thing is with me is I knew no one around me that suffered with infertility. No one. My mom had 6 kids. My sister has 6 kids. My brother has 5. My husband's, he's one of 6. Everyone has children. Never struggled. So it's I had no one to turn to. I didn't know anyone that was dealing with what I was dealing with. I didn't even know what PCOS was until I got diagnosed with it. I had no idea. So, that was just a whole nother thing. I felt so isolated because, I knew people had miscarriages, but actual infertility, nothing. So it was tough. And, like you said, at the beginning, seeing people get pregnant, I would get a little bit upset. But as the years went on, it was like, what is going on? My mental health, 2016, I want to say it was a really bad spot for me.
Okay.
And that was rough. It was rough. But Eric, he has been, man, he is amazing.
Yeah.
So, but like I said, I don't know personally before starting the IVF process where he was, if it really affected him. I do know after our miscarriage, that was tough on him. And he told me, he was like, I don't know how many times I can deal with this.
Yeah.
He was like, seeing on the monitor your baby and then knowing they're no longer. He was like, that's I don't
hard.
know.
Yeah.
So my hat's off to women who, man, that you see have gone through so many failed transfers, miscarriages, and they just continue plugging on, because that is, it is tough. It is tough.
Well, the ones too who can get pregnant
By
so
themselves,
easily,
and then they can't
but
keep a
then
pregnancy.
they can't hold them. And so then, like, I feel like that's a whole nother ballgame. With IVF, like, you're choosing to do that, and like it's kind of a different process. I feel like, but if you can naturally conceive just fine, I feel like that's just a whole nother even ballgame. Like
and there's so many layers to it. So many layers to it, because it's like you don't know what someone's going through, and you get those people that are like, "Why do you keep trying?" And it's like, well, you've never been in that position, so you don't know what it feels like, that desire, that want to build your family. And then you get the comments of just adopt. And that is like the most insensitive thing, because adoption is not a fallback plan. You should be adopting because that is what you're called to. And like, it's about the child and not just fulfilling this hole in your heart, which we got those comments too. And actually after we had our miscarriage, someone, just go adopt a baby. Let's not. So, but yeah, so it was tough going through that. It was definitely tested my faith, many, many, many times, just questioning, what is the purpose? What is the reason? Why am I going through this? Why is it so easy for everyone else that I know? And it's so hard for me. And, and then you get those people on the other side too, that are like, you're not praying hard enough. You're not believing enough. It's your faith isn't that strong. And it's like, okay, you don't know me.
Yeah.
And, sometimes, when God says, wait, it's wait. And it's, I am trusting in his time. And, like, I'm not just, I have a medical diagnosis. I had an actual reason for why this is not happening. So.
And it's just scary. Even if you do have faith and you are waiting, you're constantly questioning, like, am I waiting in the right way? Am I supposed to be doing a little bit more? Am I supposed to be doing less? How long am I waiting?
Exactly.
What should I be doing while I wait?
Yep.
Am I supposed to be looking at a different route while I wait? Like, Lord, what do you want me to do while I wait?
Too. We had actually discussed, looking into fostering to adopt, because adoption in and of itself, private adoption, is so expensive, and it is such a lengthy process.
And not covered by that fancy insurance.
And not covered by insurance. You're right. Absolutely. And so it's like, that's a whole nother, road to travel that has its own struggles, and it's not a guarantee, and those birth moms who choose to do that have every right to say no. And, I don't blame them for changing their mind, because it is such a life altering thing whenever you bring a child into this world. And so it's like, you have to be ready for that. Whatever path you take, you have to be ready for every little bump in the road, setback, or whatever. And,
every heartbreak that comes along. It's going to happen.
Absolutely. And so it's one of those things that we had discussed and we had looked at. And whenever we had got to that point, it was, like I said, during COVID. So for us, the easier path at that point, I don't really want to say easy, because it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
The more, I don't even know what the best way to put this, pursuing IVF was a better option because of the state of the world in of itself, of what it would look like to do the classes that you have to take to get certified to be, a foster parent and all of that stuff. Cause like I said, I was going to all my doctor's appointments by myself because
you can't do those fostering classes by yourself.
So it's like, it's just, we didn't know what that road looked like. And it was very tumultuous just around the world, in our country, so we were just like, let's do something that we know that we can handle. And that's what it was. And again, in the end, no matter what, God had the say in whether or not I was going to have a child, if I was going to be able to get pregnant, stay pregnant, and bring a child into this world. And if it turned out that no, that wasn't the case, then okay, we already had the thought of doing fostering, possibly adopting, and we will readdress that if this is the case, if that's still something that we feel called to do. We were blessed with our boys, when a lot of people do not walk away from this journey with kids. And we still talk about to this day, even though we have children, maybe when they're older, looking into fostering children. So that is still something that we're called to. It wasn't ever just, oh, we'll do this if this doesn't happen. It's something that we were called to before, and we still have on our hearts that possibly, maybe we could do that in the future. Yeah. So, yeah, it was just, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of, and it's, if you haven't walked it, you just don't fully understand it. I didn't understand it, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It is such a tough road to walk. Tests, marriages, beyond anything. I am thankful that it didn't put us in the point of, bumping heads. We definitely I feel like there's one of two ways. It can either like push you apart or it can pull you closer together. And I definitely felt walking that with him, it did bring us closer together. He saw what I was going through, what I was willing to do to build this family with him. Yeah. And he has told me so many times that he is thankful for everything that I've done, to bring our boys into this world. So, but yeah.
So it's June 2021.
2021.
And we're pregnant.
We are pregnant.
What are we doing now?
We are going to our doctor and confirming everything is great. I think at 14 weeks is when we just got a weird vibe from our doctor. Not our doctor. I loved him. He was great. It was his staff. I was tired of chasing people, trying to find answers for stuff, getting information. It was a whole cluster. And I don't know if it was because we were still kind of pandemic life was still happening, not to the extent of 2020, but, we were still,
yeah, for sure.
So then it was like, okay, well, let's go a different route. Let's see what our other options are, what we can do. And so I had mentioned to him, what do you think about a birth center? Kind of like a happy medium of, not fully clinical like a doctor, but, still, having, that hands-on or whatever.
And a little separation.
Yes.
From home. For some people, I feel like the birth center just gives them that mental separation of like, because I've talked about this with midwives and stuff too. Ultimately, there really is not much of a difference between a home birth and a birth center birth. Like, they're pretty much the same. Yep. They joke and they say it's really just either your house or my house. Yep. is the difference. But I feel like for a lot of moms and dads, it really helps them is to just kind of get that mental separation of like, this is not my home. I'm still going like to their office and I'm still going to this place where we're going to have a baby.
Yep. Yeah. So that was, so we started researching. We found a couple that were close to us in our area. But after doing more research, found out that their like qualifications were very, very strict. So like anything that could, pop up, you were immediately like disqualified from being in their care. And I knew that because of my PCOS that I run a higher risk for gestational diabetes. Okay. And the one that I was really interested in that was very close to our home, that was an immediate, even if it's diet controlled, they are immediately, it was, okay, you could not be a patient there. Yeah. So then we found the birth center that we delivered at, and went up there toward the facility, kind of went over everything with them, like my concerns with like the whole, possibility of having gestational diabetes. And they said, as long as we can keep it diet controlled, and we track your numbers and all that stuff, and you don't need to be on insulin, then we are more than comfortable having your care be with us. And so we went ahead and signed up with them, put in, whatever the paperwork was that we had to do, and got on with them. And we were loving it. There was a lot of hustle and bustle going on. They had kind of picked up popularity in the area.
Especially post-COVID, 2020.
Yep. And I feel like that's a lot of people were kind of steering away from hospitals because of guidelines that were put in place with women that were delivering in the hospitals.
Yeah.
I know my cousin chose to do a home birth with her twins during 2020 because of what the hospitals had said. She was like, yeah, I'm not doing all that.
Yeah.
So we went to them and did find out that I had gestational diabetes. I was lucky enough to have that diet controlled. One of the midwife owners was on top of my care, fully tracking what I was eating, having me test multiple times a day, all of that stuff. So with her guidance, I was able to keep all of that, under control, even my fasting levels, which is really hard for a lot of women, where they tend to struggle because you can't control that number.
Right.
What you eat before you go to bed can kind of influence it. But for the most part, if you have a high fasting level, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I was able to do that. So I was able to stay in their care. And then that's whenever I found you.
Me? So how did you guys decide you want, because most people don't know about photography before. I'm guessing, especially, knowing where you had your first, that you had no idea birth photography was even a thing until
I did
you saw all the pictures and videos.
To a certain extent, I did, because at that point I feel like from the research of doing, the birth centers and stuff, and just on the explore page on Instagram, I was having, I guess because of being pregnant, the algorithm pushes stuff to you or whatever. So I was seeing a lot more birth photography, but I was also, as a child, obsessed with a birth story.
Same.
On TLC.
Same.
Obsessed with it.
That's why I do what I do.
And so I always watched that with my mom, and my parents were both huge on documenting everything, pictures, videos when we were kids. We have so many pictures from our childhood, home videos, and all that stuff. And I'm so thankful for that, because neither one of my parents are here anymore. So having those memories to look back on is huge for not only me, but my siblings.
Yeah.
And so after going through what we went through and not knowing if we would ever experience, having a child again, I told Eric, I want this to be documented. I want to have pictures that we can look at, when we're older, to have, because to me, it's very, very special. And he was like, absolutely. He was totally on board. And so with the birth center, they give you a list of doulas and birth photographers and all kinds of stuff, if that's something you're interested in having when you deliver. So I just looked your stuff up. I went through when I was, looking at everybody. There was a few that, for whatever reason, their Instagram wasn't public, you couldn't see it. So you couldn't see their work, I guess. I don't know what that was about, but.
Well, that's not how you run a photography business.
No, not at all.
That's not productive.
Because, the birth center had their own, Instagram page where they would tag the photographer in it. And so, I'd click on it to see, oh, well, let me see what else they've got. And then you couldn't see it. And I'm like, well, that's weird, So, went through, looked at everybody, found you, and, was like, hey, let's, set up, a kind of check her out, see what it's about. And I feel like we had a couple other ones that we had looked at. But after the conversation with you, I told Eric, I was like, she's a birth photographer. I was like, she's it.
So you didn't even have any phone calls or interviews with anybody else?
Nope.
Okay.
Yep. So, and I feel like we booked you October, November that year. I feel like it was around that time.
Beats me. I mean, I could probably go back and look, but I didn't even think to do that.
That's when it was. So
I remember we met at Chick-fil-A.
Yes, we did.
And you drove a white Hyundai Palisade.
Yes, we did. Yep. So that was something that was huge that we wanted to have. Because the midwives also were like, are you sure you don't want to have a doula? We really, recommend having a doula.
Yeah.
And for us, it was I felt like having you there documenting it was more important than having another support person, which again, to each their own. Everyone is comfortable with what they're comfortable with.
Well, Eric was literally never more than 6 inches from your face.
And
so I'm not really sure that a doula could have even gotten in there.
Yeah.
To be honest.
That's the thing. Because when we discussed that at one of my appointments, I think it was like my 36 or 37 week appointment, where, you know, they were like, are you sure you don't want to have one? And it's like, he is my person. He is who I want to be there. Like again, no shame to doulas, nothing bad against them. I know so many people that have great, you know, experiences with them. I don't know you. And like, I don't feel like, you know, in a couple appointments, you know, like I can establish that level of comfortability with you to where I'm going to want to lean on you for that type of support, if that makes sense. I am extremely introverted. I am not this person that just goes out and like just talks to anybody. And so I knew having had experience being in, like with my sister, whenever she had her babies, my friend, my mom, even whenever she had my younger brother and sister, I had a feel for what that space can feel like. And I know that two experiences is exactly the same. And women can say, this is how I want it to be. This is what's going to happen. And then they get in there and it's completely different. I didn't know if I was going to want to be touched, if I was going to want to be talked to, if I was going to want to labor in the tub, if I was going to want to be in the bed, moving around. I didn't know. But the one thing that I did know is I just wanted Eric. That was like him. And so, you know, we got the birth partner book and he read it front to back and he does not read. And he was on it. Yeah. He was like everything that they were, you know, telling him at all the appointments, because he went to all of them. He was right there and learning alongside of me, you know, because he was like, I know nothing about this. I have no idea about birth, pregnancy, newborn babies. He was like, I know nothing. So he was, you know, fully committed to learning everything that he needed to be the best support for me in that space. Yeah. And it worked out great. Like he was amazing, absolutely amazing. And it was funny because one of the appointments of 37, 38 weeks, you know, when they go over, you know, everything, you know, that you're expecting whenever you're there, they were like, well, where do you see yourself? He's like, I'm catching the baby. And they were like, oh, you want to do that? And he said, absolutely. He said, if we are in a position to where like I can catch the baby, I'm catching the baby. Yeah. And so, you know, he did, but yeah, no, it was absolutely having you there, birth center. We were just like dead set, like this is how it's going to go. So, and we were very pleasantly surprised that it did. It went better than we expected, I guess you could say.
How did Eric feel in that initial switch from hospital to out of hospital?
He was so rubbed wrong by the way that our OBGYN's office just handled everything that he was like fully on board for it. Okay. And then after having the tour at the birth center, seeing all the things that they had in place in case of emergency, if something were to go wrong, you know, he was like, okay, I feel good about this. Like this is going to be okay. So yeah, he was good. He was, you know, way more into it than I expected him to be. I expected there to be a little bit of a pushback, but he was like, nah. If you want to do it, let's do it. Yeah. So,
I mean, he was great. You guys did amazing.
Well, thank you.
You definitely worked hard.
It was a long one
for that birth. I have no idea if there's any truth to this at all, but I have heard through the years that IVF babies in particular can be hard to birth. Apparently, I was told
I don't know.
They're hard to get in and they're hard to get out.
That I don't
is what I've been told. So I don't know if that's true or not.
I know both of my experiences.
I know you worked real hard for both of them, really, but especially that first one.
Theo he always was in a weird position, and they had said it every time I had gone in for my appointments. They were like, he is sitting in this hip. And I had gotten chiropractic care to try and adjust and get him or whatever. And he just, for whatever reason, wanted to be in my right hip and just hang out there the entire time. So he was head down basically the entire time, but just not perfectly aligned. So yeah, that was definitely
Yeah.
That was definitely interesting trying to get him out.
It was.
Yeah.
So looking back, do you have any like specific memories from that birth, or like things that you remember very well, or
I feel like
feelings about the birth overall?
if I could have, barring a few things, like it was long. And there were a few things that we found out after the fact that was kind of scary. Like, oh, that could have gone sideways pretty quickly, but for the most part, no, like if I could give birth that way, like 15 times, I would have so many kids.
Yeah.
Because it was just so empowering, and just, I did that, and it's like, you hear a lot of people that are like, oh, just because you didn't get epidural, you don't get a trophy. And it's like, it's not for a trophy. It's because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do this. Like, I am strong enough to do that. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time, so it's like, I wanted to experience that. I saw my sister give birth, unmedicated, and, it's powerful watching that. So I really did. I wanted to. And also, we were of the mindset as well, getting pregnant was so clinical. It was so doctor driven, timeline driven, that it was like, let's have something that is just, it's going to happen. And it did. And I was very thankful that, my water broke 5 days early, which is crazy because that's not the norm. And so, I went into labor naturally. Everything was good. And it was, I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
And it was funny, on the way home, Eric goes, so you want to do that again? I was like, no, never in a million years.
Yeah.
No, I'm good. I'm good. But
then too, you had a lot of blood loss afterwards too, right?
Yep, I did.
So so there were definitely a couple things that happened. Like I remember you didn't get your
my bath,
your herbal bath and stuff that night, and they kept you longer, I feel like, than normal.
She made me sleep. Actually,
she made you take a nap.
Yeah, she made me take a nap
before you could go home.
But she was like, I feel like a lot of this, blood loss, but also it just exhaustion, because my water had broke at 5 a.m. and I didn't have him until almost midnight. So like that was a long day. And then just, the act of pushing a baby out, that's a lot. It's a lot of work.
Well, you guys lived pretty far from the birth center.
We lived about 45 minutes.
Eric was going to have to drive you home too. And he had also been up
the entire time.
By the time postpartum is almost over, we're looking at 24 hours now.
Yeah. Because we pulled into our driveway, I think at like right at 6 a.m.
Yeah. So it's like 25 hours from the time your water broke.
But yeah, no, they definitely, she was like, we're going to get everything cleaned up. We're going to get, because they were on call, because there was another woman that given birth, like 6 hours before Theo was born, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
And so, they were like, we're just going to get everything wrapped up here so we can head home. You guys nap while we do that. And so we did. So we slept for like an hour or something like that, which helped, because it was funny. After I got up after that nap, she was like, you look like a completely different person. She was like, I can tell that did you good. So yeah, but it was funny. He asked me, he was like, you, and I was like, no.
It's always, I'm telling you, it's always the dads. Like right after they're ready to go again. And
I
nobody
don't
looks at them
I
like,
don't think he wanted to. It was just, I think it was checking in on, how did that feel?
Yeah.
What did you think? And do you think you could do it again?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, no, it was a good experience. I definitely, enjoyed it. But yeah.
So I have one selfish question before we move on, because I was there, and so I and I documented it, so I know what the day was like, but I also know what the gallery is like. And I always like to ask, like, I guess when you look back at those photos now, I don't know, or like when you first saw them, like, did anything surprise you? Like, were you like, how'd you feel about the photos? Were there anything where you were like, oh, I don't remember that happening, or oh, like, I totally remember that, and I can like feel that when I look at the picture?
So when I looked at the pictures, first thing I cried, like just cried, because it was like, oh my gosh, so beautiful. And just, because it was, like I said, we had been waiting for that day for so long. But it helped me, those pictures helped me piece that day together a lot more than just relying on my memory. Because when you're in, contractions back to back, like you're in transition, your mind is just, you are not taking in what's going on around you. Like there could have been an entire, like 20 people in that room and I would not have known it, because I was just so in what was going on. So having those pictures, it helps me kind of like put like a timeline together. Okay. Like I remember that. And then we did this and then this happened or whatever. So it's like, I'm able to piece that day together a lot more clearly than if I didn't have them.
Right.
You know, because like, you know, people get like snapshots on like their cell phone or whatever whenever they don't have a birth photographer, but like having that,
the whole story,
and then you surprising me with the video.
Yes.
Oh, I was not expecting that. So that was even better because I was able to see literally from like when we got to the birth center to whenever Theo was born. So I still look at them. He was, you know, he's 3.5 and I'm still looking at those
you
photos.
Guys still use, you guys still use them for like birthdays and like Mother's
'cause
Day and
they are
Father's
just
Day. Like you guys
so
still share them
good.
all the time and I love it.
Because they are so special to us. So special. I love them.
Love it. So good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've had a baby.
Had a baby.
And we're just trucking along. And then what like now we're gonna have another baby. What does that look like?
So we decided that at first Theo was a tough newborn. He was tough. And we actually discussed, are we one and done? Because holy moly, when you go, and I feel like this, not a lot of people feel like this because, you know, like you have newborns that are rough and some that are easy, but like they haven't been adults or adulting for as long as we had. And so in a routine, like 15 years, it was just the two of us. We had, you know what I mean? So
I can get that.
Bringing him in, holy moly, completely just flipped our world upside down. And we were like, what are we doing?
They say the transition from 0 to 1 is usually the hardest.
Yeah. See, but I've heard some people say 1 to 2 is harder.
Yeah.
I don't agree. But again,
but I think
I was, 34 years old whenever I had him.
I think being set in that routine, like you were saying, like the longer you go, like even though you're maybe more prepared financially or
we've had all the hard
you're more
conversations
mature,
and all
like
that stuff.
Everything feels potentially safer and more secure, and you are technically more ready on the outside. You're also much more set in your ways.
And you're not. And my husband is a very analytical person in, diagnosing a problem. Like when he always would say like a car.
Me nuts.
Like if I've diagnosed and it's like I've gone through the checklist, this is taken care of and this is taken care of and this is taken care of. So why are they not happy?
Yeah.
Why is it not?
My husband does that with me all the time. He'll be like, you have everything you want. You say you're not mad, but you're mad. And I'm like, but I'm not mad for a reason. So just let me be mad. And he's like, but that does there has to be a reason. That doesn't make sense.
And in Eric's mind, it's like if he's fed, if he's changed, if he's had a nap, all of those things are done. Why is he still crying? What is wrong with him? So it threw him for a loop. And even though I have so many nieces and nephews, I was a preschool teacher for so long. I've been around kids my entire life. I'd never been a mom. It was never on me 24/7. So it was a really tough adjustment. And so there were a few months where we were like, oh, I don't know if we're going to do this again. This is tough. But then Theo got a little bit older. Things got a little bit easier. And we were like, again, we are blessed to have IVF coverage. We had reached, obviously, our out-of-pocket max with our insurance because we had a baby.
Oh, yes.
So it was, should we try to do a transfer before the end of the year just to see? We were not expecting anything to work because it took 3 tries to get Theo. So we were like,
so you had Theo in February.
So we had a consultation in September with our IVF doctor. Just to see what that process would look like.
Whose idea was that? Like, did they call you initially or did you call them?
We called them. And
so you had him in February. At what point had you already gone through all of those motions to be like, first I'm really miserable and things are crazy to, okay, I can see the light again.
So like about 4 months, whenever he was about 4 months old, that's whenever we were like, we'd gotten our rhythm down. And, of course, there's going to be hiccups and stuff whenever you have kids because it's never smooth sailing forever.
Every day is different. So.
Exactly. So it was just one of those things where we were like, we have them, we have these embryos, we have the coverage. Should we just see? Let's talk to the doctor, see what they say. Because we didn't even know what their policy was on how soon long we could do a transfer because, you do want your body to, heal and it's different for every type of, delivery. So when we talked to them, we called them and kind of had a video consultation because nothing was being done at that point. We were just kind of going over what our options were. And when he found out that we, had an uncomplicated, unmedicated delivery, everything was fine with me. Everything was fine with Theo. He was like, whenever you are ready,
let's go.
We can do this.
Yeah.
And so he wanted me to wean Theo, which was a little heartbreaking because, you know, that was one of those things that I was blessed in the sense where we did not struggle with breastfeeding. I never had mastitis. I never had clogged ducts. We had a lip tie and a tongue tie that was, you know, resolved. I think he was like 2 weeks old. And from that point on, it was smooth sailing, like super, super easy to breastfeed that child, which I was so thankful for.
Looking back, I wish we had gotten photos.
I really do wish.
With Theo. Like, I wish I had known a little bit more.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you, I'd have to go back and see what I was doing in August of that year.
I do have a few, whenever we did our newborn in-home session, we have some, he decided he wanted to nurse at that point, which is funny because like he never really, I had to like at that point still like we need to eat. So we do have a few there, but and then Eric was always, you know, snapping photos at that point too.
That's another thing about Eric. He's definitely into the pictures too.
Yes. So he wanted us to wean, which I agreed with because the amount of medication that you're on, I didn't want to take the chance of transferring that through my breast milk to Theo. So he said, once I weaned, we would obviously have to like, you know, initiate a period and all that kind of stuff. And then go through not as much testing as we did the last time because I had already done everything. But he did want to do like another saline ultrasound to see what my uterus looked like. Found out I had polyps again. So we had to do.
It was September when you called him.
Yep.
Sorry, I know I keep slowing you.
No,
I keep
you're
like
good.
Interrupting you. You're like doing such a great job. Like, wait, hold on. So you called the doctor in September. Decided you were going to wean.
Yep.
So did you wean immediately or start the weaning process immediately?
We started it then because I didn't want to just cold turkey it because like I said, I had been very lucky with no mastitis, no clogged ducts, and I didn't want to do that to myself at the end and like go into, you know, this whole process coming off of that.
So did you seek like help with that? Like, did you?
No. I just did it myself.
Okay.
So what I did is I would nurse him like in the morning and at night, but then I started pumping. And so we were doing bottles instead of just directly nursing. And then as we did that, we started mixing formula into like the breast milk and stuff and kind of doing a half and half situation.
So how long did it take you to wean him?
Probably about like a month.
Okay.
Like I think I was officially done like the middle of October with him. So, and he was fine. Like we never had any issues with him transitioning to formula. And it also helped too that he was like eating a lot of solids at that point.
Okay.
Like he switched over to food really well. Like he was all about it. So we did that. And then November, I had my surgery for cleaning out the polyps. And then December, 2 years to the day of our miscarriage, we transferred Benjamin.
Yeah, because I remember we did a fall family session somewhere in that October, November.
It was November because I just had my surgery. It was like 2 days for you were like, what do you mean you just had surgery?
Yeah, and then you're like, well, you're like, oh, also we're gonna do a transfer next month. And I was like, what?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
And we didn't expect, and like I said, we did it because we knew it was covered. And so it was, why not take advantage of that? We are blessed in the fact that we didn't have to fork over that money. So it was, let's go ahead and just see what happens. If it happens,
roll the dice.
You know, like, let's see.
Why not?
And it worked.
Yep.
And we were shocked. So it was like, you know, we found out we were traveling back to North Carolina for Christmas. And so we were able to, it was confirmed on my sister's birthday, which was hilarious to me. So I was able to say happy birthday.
Yeah.
You have another niece or nephew coming.
Yay.
And so, you know, we told our family then. I texted you and said, what are you doing in August?
Love it.
And so, yeah. And then we had an ultrasound. No, we hadn't had our ultrasound yet. I was making dinner and I started bleeding really heavy again. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this is happening again. Like, what the heck? So immediately contacted our clinic the next morning. They got us in same day. And there he was, fine. You know, they were like, probably had a subchorionic hematoma that just happened to bleed, because I didn't have any bleeding after that. And so he was good to go in there, just bebopping around. And, you know, everything was good. So that was that. And yeah.
So you graduated from the clinic again, I'm guessing.
Yep.
So now, what were those conversations like when you started to talk about, okay, what is this birth going to look like? Like, so what do we want to do this time? Because there was also a move in there too.
Yes, we did. We moved because we knew that if we were going to have another baby, our current house, not that it was too small, the setup was not conducive for Eric working from home, because we had a split plan where our master bedroom was in the back of the house next to the living area. So like the living room, the kitchen, the dining was right there. And then the guest bedrooms were in the front of the house. So if Eric had his office in the front of the house, Theo's room was right there. We had the possibility of him crying and interrupting. But if Eric was in our bedroom, Theo and I couldn't make any noise in the living room and kitchen, you know, and then if we brought another baby into this, it's going to be a whole nother, you know, whole thing.
Yeah.
So
you had a baby.
We had a baby.
Moved.
Did
a transfer.
Yep.
Got pregnant. And now we're planning birth number 2.
And so this is where it gets dicey with how we approach this. The birth center where we had Theo, when we had Theo, I could tell things were crazy. There was a lot of rotating through the midwives, which I get why they did that, because you don't know who's going to be on call whenever you go in to labor. But there was just a lot of back and forth. One of the midwives that we had seen pretty consistently through Theo's pregnancy just was gone. While I was still pregnant with Theo. Like she like left the birth center. I had no idea where she went. I was like, oh, okay. And then after Theo was born, I still followed them on their socials and, you know, being a part of their Facebook group for the moms who have, you know, like delivered there, you know, there was a lot of stuff happening. There was a lot of overturn. There was a lot of midwives leaving. There was a lot of, questioning what was going on there. And so that, coupled with us being a little bit further away in our new house, we were like, let's not go back there. Something just didn't seem right with all of it.
With that, like, because I know too, like, which I know, like, we'll get into in a second, but, you know, again, being at Theo's birth, I know there were a couple of things potentially medically that happened
that could have gone wrong,
were also a little concerning. And so I guess I thought, or just assumed, that those were the only reason that you guys decided to change up your plan. And so, so now I guess I'm just curious, if, when you guys were leaving your first birth center, were you going to look at other birth centers and were you still open to an out-of-hospital birth, even leaving that birth center? Or were you already pretty set on...
We were kind of already leaning
wanting to go to the hospital this time.
Were, you know, that was the initial kickoff to, you know, do we want to do this again? Knowing that, you know, like we could have had, you know, oh my gosh.
Yeah, what was it that you guys experienced that was concerning?
Theo's cord, we could have had a cord prolapse, which that's terrifying. You know, because when he was born, it was bundled on his shoulder. And, you know, the midwife was like, we are super lucky that this did not, you know, come out before him. And then, you know, the hemorrhaging, it wasn't super severe. She was able to get it under control like immediately, which was, you know, I'm very thankful for. And then also we found out, I cannot remember what it's called. Are you looking it up? His cord?
I could be looking up the name of it, which I'm not. I'm actually looking to see if I still had the picture.
Yeah.
I know, because I know I took a picture on someone's phone. It may have actually been a midwife's phone that I took the picture on.
Because they were going to use it for educating the midwives.
Let me Google it real quick and see if I can.
Because of the way where his cord was inserted, it wasn't inserted right, and it wasn't protected by the Wharton's jelly. Is that what it is?
Yeah, basically, like, I think, again, I don't know what it's called, and I'm not a midwife. But basically, yeah, like there was something off about the insertion, and there was kind of like it wasn't inserted right where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it was like really like one of the veins or arteries or
They were
something inside
exposed.
your cord were basically, exposed. And like if your water had broken right there on that insertion or near that
Like
insertion,
Theo would not be here.
It could have whatever it could have done, however it could have done it, it basically could have immediately caused him to bleed to death.
Yep.
If your water had broken right there near that cord insertion, and I guess it would have like snapped that vein or artery. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know which one's which. It would have nicked one of those or could have nicked one of those. And I believe the midwives did say that if that had happened,
it would have been catastrophic. Yep. It would have been catastrophic. And there's nothing that they could have done.
There's nothing
to
that,
stop
like,
it.
literally nothing they could have done. There's no way to know. There's no way to prepare for that.
Yep.
There's no way to see that on ultrasound or anything. There's literally no way to know that. And unfortunately, like, I think, again, just to express the severity, like, he would have bled internally or bled out, like, almost instantly. Like, it would have happened so fast that, like, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I would say, like, even maybe if you had been in a hospital or even if you had been planning to birth in a hospital, if your water had broken before you got there, like,
my water broke beforehand. There's nothing that
even a doctor could have done to do anything. Like, I don't even know that an emergency C-section could have or would have.
Probably not. I don't even know.
Like, I don't even know. But I know, I do remember it was pretty, like, wow.
Yeah, the reality of the situation after the fact, even though he was there and safe and okay, it was one of those things where it was like, okay, you know, like, okay. So that was one of the big things where it was like, okay, we had 1, 2, 3 things, whatever.
Yeah,
so like
3,
maybe, you know, let's look into that. And then, like I said, we moved, which put us further away from that birth center. And then all the things that happened, it was kind of like, just, you know, solidifying our choice to, you know, going to a hospital for Ben. So I just looked up, you know, OBs that were close to us, with hospitals that, you know, like better ratings. Cause you know, you can't really always trust hospital ratings because you're going to have those people that have a bad experience and, you know, it happens everywhere. So we found our doctor, and I love her. Her practice is just her and one other doctor. And the way that they are set up is I am her patient and her patient alone. I did not see the other doctor.
Okay.
I only saw her for my appointments. And she wasn't a doctor who just pushed me out. She listened to everything. My first appointment with her when I was establishing care, we went to her office and sat down and went over everything. My history from the time I turned 18. Everything that I've gone through, all of our IVF stuff, Theo's birth, up one side and down the other, everything that happened. She wanted all of the details. And she asked me, she was like, are you wanting to do another unmedicated? Like, what are you hoping for? You know, like, and I told her, you know, like, I would love to do that, but I also know that things happen. I'm very realistic in that. Like, I'm not naive in, you know, emergencies that come up, especially having found out after Theo was born, what could have happened. And so, you know, she listened to everything, every concern that I had, every appointment that I went to. If I was like, you know, this doesn't seem right, she's like, we're running tests on it. We're going to figure it out. What's going on? And, you know, then towards the end of my pregnancy, she did my ultrasounds in office. It wasn't an ultrasound tech. She did my ultrasounds. She wanted to see where he was at. She wanted to check all of the stuff to see, you know, so she was very much on top of everything when it came to my pregnancy with Ben. And I was so thankful for that because you hear so many women that talk about, you know, their OBs just kind of push off everything that they say, oh, that's just a part of pregnancy. That's just a part of pregnancy. You know, like I was having really bad itching all over my body with Ben. And I know with cholestasis, they typically look for it to be in like the palms of your hand and the bottoms of your feet. And mine wasn't just, you know, there, it was all over. And she still was like, we're still going to run the test. She was like, even though I don't think it's what it is, she was like, for your ease of mind and just to make sure I am right, she was like, we're still going to run that test.
Oh, for sure.
And she did, you know, like it wasn't, I didn't have to push back on it. Like there was she listened to everything that I said. And I don't want to say validate because sometimes our concerns are a little bit off kilter when you're pregnant. You know, your brain's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
But she listened to me, and she, you know, heard what I was saying, and she was all about me having the birth that I wanted to have, as long as I was okay and as long as Ben was okay. And so his birth also looked different in the fact that we had a baby at home that we had to think about, which was another thing with us talking about birth center and hospital. I didn't want to be induced, but that was something that we discussed because we had to think of childcare for Theo.
Especially because you guys don't have
anybody
any family
us.
here.
So we had established a babysitter that she, like, the entire summer, she was coming over like 3 times a week to hang out with Theo, for him to get comfortable. She was still living at home. So she was free, where if I were to, you know, like go into labor in the middle of the night, she could come over there and be with Theo. But we also had, she was like our contingency plan, because what we were hoping for was my sisters to be able to come in from Alaska to be with Theo. So that way we knew that he was, you know, we trusted our babysitter, obviously, but it's just when it's your family.
It's different. Yeah.
So we had discussed with my doctor at my 39-week appointment, if I don't go into labor in this next week, what do we think about doing an induction on my due date? I did not want to go, you know, like early. I wasn't trying to, you know, push for an early delivery. And she was like, I am more than okay with that. She was like, you know, your water broke early last time. She was like, so if we make it there, we make it there. If we don't, we, you know, we'll see what we can do. And so when we did that, we got us on the books. My sisters were able to book a flight, so they knew that they would be there, hopefully 2 days before, you know, we were going to do this induction. So they flew in Wednesday morning, and we were there. You know, they hung out Thursday. We did breakfast. We went shopping and all that stuff. And then my water broke. Because I remember texting you saying, hey, this is when they want us at the hospital. This is what this, you know, so, you know, my water hasn't broken yet. So this, you know, as of right now, this is the plan. And I think it was like an hour later, I was like, jokes.
JK.
My water just broke.
Didn't it break like all over your couch too?
All over my couch. Because we were actually getting ready to go to the pool. And I thought I had to use the bathroom. I was like, man, I am having some gas pains like this. My stomach is like, whatever. So I stood up to go to the bathroom, and my water just broke. And I was like, baby, those weren't gas pains. Those were contractions. Whoops. So, you know, then, you know, of course, the house was like chaos at that point.
Oh, yeah. Everybody goes nuts.
Go into Jessica's, you know, cleaning up amniotic fluid out of my couch. I go up to use the bathroom, like to clean myself up, and I realize there's meconium in my amniotic fluid. So I was like, all right, we're not staying at home.
How dark did it seem? Like, what color did it seem? Like, was it like just a little, like, would you say it was just a little, or?
It was a little bit.
Right off the bat, were you like, oh, that's
because like,
definitely something.
I went to the bathroom, and, you know, after your water breaks, everyone thinks it's just one gush of water, and then it's like nothing. But like every time you move or you have a contraction or anything,
it gushes.
A little bit more comes out. And so I went to the bathroom, and I noticed, you know, when I wiped, I was like, oh, there's like little pieces of, you know, like that's not supposed to be there. And so I told Eric, I was like, hey, we're not going to be laboring at home. We're just going to go ahead and go in, because I, you know, like there's meconium present. Like we need to just go ahead and get to the hospital, whatever. And my doctor also was like, since your water broke by itself, she was like, I would feel more comfortable if you came in. If the same thing happens, if your water breaks, just go ahead and come in. She's like, I don't really want you to labor at home just in case, because second births tend to go quicker than, you know, first. So, you know, got cleaned up, got everything ready, basically rushed out the door. And contractions weren't really, you know, hitting at that point. And then the next thing you know, it was just like one right after the other, like on the way there, and it just so happened to be dinner time. So it was like rush hour traffic trying to get down there, and it was crazy. And so they were like right on top of each other, and just something in me just knew that something wasn't right. It just did not feel right. So we get there, and it just so happened to be like shift change. Like they got me admitted like right at like 7:00. So like my nurse had just gotten there. And so they're checking me out. I'm like 5 centimeters dilated, and there's still meconium coming out with, you know, my amniotic fluid.
And 5 centimeters is pretty crazy. So
Yeah.
it's 7 p.m. You guys, it was like just before dinner, you guys were going to go to the pool. So what time do you think that was? Like,
I think my water broke right around like 4:45, 5 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay.
So within that time, and I know that I had her check me at my 39-week appointment just to see where I was at. I know it's not an indicator of what's going to happen, but I just wanted to see.
Yeah.
And I was like 2.5, 3 is what she said. So I had started progress, doing something, but just was hanging out.
Yeah.
So I was like 5 centimeters and just the meconium was coming out and my contractions were literally, there was no break in them. As soon as it was going down, it was going right back up. And at that point, I just looked at Eric and I was like, I'm just going to get the epidural. I was like, this is a lot. What's going on? And he was like, okay, cool. That's fine. If that's what you want, you do it. And so got the epidural. Everything was good. Contractions were still right on top of the other. Ben was not handling them that well as they'd wanted at that point. It wasn't like it was crazy, but they were like, we really need to keep an eye on this. And then the next thing you know, my blood pressure just bottomed out. I looked at Eric. I was like, I'm going to pass out. And he was like, are you? I said, nope, I'm not okay. And so they got me situated. That was like a 15-minute type of ordeal trying to get me back to where I needed to be. And again, during this time, my contractions were literally just nonstop. Boom, 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 boom. And so you showed up and then Jessica showed up shortly after that, I feel, or was it a little bit later? See, this is where it gets hazy. I don't remember how long you were there before Jessica, or was she already there?
I feel like she may have already been
was
there.
She already
actually.
there?
Okay. I definitely don't think she had been there for a long time.
Okay.
But I do feel like I live a little further from the hospital. And the only thing there's only a few things that I specifically remember about that night. One was I'd never been to this hospital before and I got lost in the parking lot. And I was like, I don't know where I'm going. So I finally just found a door and I'm just going to go in here and find somebody to show me where to go.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, I feel like it just all happened really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I got there at the perfect time, but even still, like things were just happening really fast. I mean, your water broke, contractions went crazy. You got an epidural, your blood pressure was crazy. His heart rate was not great. Like things were just spiraling literally from the minute your water broke. So it was wild.
It was definitely a wild ride. And, I remember them saying, like, we're going to have to stop your contractions because he is just not recovering from these the way that we want to see. If I'm not mistaken, I remember one time them saying his heart rate was like 50, 40s, in the 40s or whatever. And so it was like, oh my gosh. And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. They were flipping me, flopping me, hands and knees, sitting me straight up, doing all the things, trying to get him, to be okay with what was going on. And my doctor wasn't even on call, but they called her. She came in. When they sent her my strips, what was going on, she came in. And which, again, goes back to the care that I received during my pregnancy and that she was like, I don't care that I'm not on call. I'm going to come in and we're going to handle this.
Yeah.
And so, it was a situation of if we don't go now, it will be an emergency. So let's just go ahead and get him out. Which again, I did not want, but I needed my baby to be okay. So, it was get him out. And I was also thinking, I have another baby at home. I need to be there for him. And I can't be stubborn and say, no, I'm not going to do a C-section because that's not what I wanted. It was, I need everyone to be okay. So that happened, but, and then we found out when we were in there, Ben was not descending. He was not engaging. Like not once did he engage to even be born vaginally because he was completely wrapped up in the cord and stuck up high. So like he was not coming down. And so, when he came out, he was all wrapped up in that cord and he continued to poop everywhere. So not only did he poop in utero as he was being born, he continued like all over the nurses, all over everyone. So
I'm a little salty. I wasn't
I know. I am salty too. I really am. I do wish, but like I said, in that moment, I was just completely out of it. I was not there. Eric was my brain at that point. But I do, like I said, I feel we had a conversation about this. I do feel like if you had pushed that anesthesiologist, I do think that
Well, if you guys had pushed,
anybody had pushed.
Really, it's the clients who have to push the hardest because they have the most say. Because again, they work for you.
That's true.
But you guys had, like, again, things had just happened so fast.
It was just,
and you guys again were like, y'all were kind of. I mean, Eric was watching Theo on the monitor at home while trying to get dressed, and like making sure that you were okay. Worried about Ben, worried about Theo. Like, you guys don't leave Theo very often.
No.
This may have been like probably one of the first and only times you guys have ever left Theo.
Yeah, overnight. That was the first time. Yeah.
There again, like, and it's not like it was one of those things where like you labored for a while and then things went downhill.
It was sideways from the get.
Things went sideways from the get go, and so I just think that you and Eric especially were just in such a spiral that thinking about pushing to get me in there just wasn't anything you had time. Like, if we had more time to be like, hey, labor's really not going very well, like C-section could be on the horizon, we would have had more time to talk about it and been like, okay, if this comes up, this is what we have to do and this is what that's going to look like. And ultimately it's your decision whether or not you want to push for that. Like, obviously I'll push too, but like I can't push by myself. So and so we just didn't get that time.
No, we didn't. But we got some photos and you got some afterwards, which is I was grateful for.
So I got to hang out with your sister.
Yeah. So it was definitely and that was just a surreal experience, having gone through unmedicated vaginal delivery and then going to we call it an urgent C-section because we weren't emergency yet, but it was urgent.
It was very urgent.
We were, getting to that point where it was like, if we don't go now, like this could be bad. So it's just, that's not easy. Like, that is not easy. And anyone who says that C-section is easy, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, now I will say, if you have a planned C-section going in, then yes, your experience is going to be much different than someone who is like laboring and doing all that things and then it turns into a C-section, or if it just immediately is an emergency C-section. It's just so hard to wrap your mind around that.
But that recovery is hard for everybody, whether you plan it or not.
Yeah, that was definitely,
that recovery is not fun for anybody.
No, it's not at all. I definitely felt like my stomach was falling out of my body every time I moved. But it is so funny because we joke about it. He was struggling so bad during contractions and all that stuff, and then comes out and his APGAR score is through the roof. He's fine. Everything's great. He's this massive baby that is just there. And it's like, dude, come on.
just complicated.
Yeah, no, he's
very demanding.
He's definitely been giving us a run for his money since literally the day he was born.
Yeah.
So,
and even now, he's so he's so sweet and he's so cute.
He's a handful.
But also he's a handful. Exactly.
He's a handful. But so it was good afterwards, and he was fine. And again, speaking to my experience obviously is going to be different from like other people's. Postpartum, a lot of people complain about, like the lack of appointments and stuff. I think I had 3 or 4 with my doctor after I had Ben. And the first one that I had, she walked in and she said, we need to discuss what happened. We need to go over in detail what happened, why it happened, so that you understand and that you can kind of come to terms with, it not going the way that you had hoped for, which I was so thankful for, because it was such a crazy night and all the things that happened. And I hemorrhaged too after having him. I had to have 3 bags of blood.
Yeah.
Whenever I was, in postpartum with him, I didn't even realize, and it was so funny because they asked me, they're like, do you feel okay? And I was like, yeah, I feel fine. And then after I got the blood transfusion, they came in and checked on me and they're like, so how are you feeling? I was like, I didn't realize how bad I felt.
Until I felt better. Yep.
I was like, I didn't realize how bad I felt until you guys,
you also didn't have anything to compare that to. Cause like in recovery, you've never had an epidural before.
Nope.
You've never had a C-section before. So you, of course, had no idea how to gauge, really, how you felt. You're like, I mean, I feel how I feel, but I don't know if that's normal.
Too, because of the medicine that I was on, like.
They give you pain medications and nausea medications.
All the things. And so it's like, I was just kind of out of sorts as it was. So it's like, I guess I feel fine. And then, no, I was not fine.
Yeah. And then once you had something to compare it to, you were like, oh, that wasn't how I was supposed to feel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the OB that was like, on rotation for, on the postpartum floor or whatever, she was like, you look much better. She was like, before you, I was like, I know you're white, but like, you're really white.
Yes.
So, it was nice that she took that time to go over and explain everything and, walk us through, all of that. And again, I'm so thankful too that she came in to do the C-section. Like, she didn't just let whoever was on call
do it.
She came in on her night off and was like, let's, we're going to do this. So yeah, very, very thankful for her. Even though it was a traumatic experience, there are good parts to it. So yeah.
So you would look back at it and consider it traumatic?
Oh, absolutely. I hate looking back at Ben's birth.
Really? But you don't feel that way about Theo's?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think it is specifically about Ben's? Is it just the C-section alone, or is it just how out of control you felt the whole time?
It was just it was so quick. I think that's what
fast.
It was. If it, like you said, if it was something that it was like, okay,
you had time to process as you went.
Yeah, it was basically like, hey, we're going to have to do this.
Yeah. Like literally right from the get-go.
And like also I saw that his heart rate was dropping and that he wasn't recovering from those contractions. And so, you think of, I need to be safe because I have a child at home. I need to make sure that, like, even though I wasn't the one that the concern was surrounding, it was him. It's a major surgery. It is a major surgery. And so it's like, I need to be okay. I need my baby to be okay. And you don't know if they're okay. And so, yeah, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because you grow this person, you don't even know them, and you're so just like protective over them. And yeah, and then talking to Eric after the fact, because he seemed so just stoic. Yes. I was like, were you okay? And he was like, nope. He was like, Jacqui, I never know. Yeah, he was like, I was freaking out. He was like, but I had to be in control for you. He was like, my mind was going to all these places of, can I do this by myself? What if something happens to him? How am I going to support you going through that while also being okay myself? So it is. It's tough. It is. Whew.
It's scary. It's just crazy how, just in general, birth is the most epic and most amazing miracle in the world, but also
the most terrifying
and scariest,
so crazy,
most out of control thing. Like, it's just, I mean, I know they say all the time, two things can be true.
Oh yeah.
And they absolutely are in birth. I mean, it's just, I don't think there's anything else in the world that's as amazing and terrifying at the same time. And anything that happens as often, but also is so unpredictable and uncontrollable.
Yep. And that's the thing, like, whenever
it's just so strange.
You have these people that talk about birth plans, and like you talk to your providers about what you want and what you expect. And like I said, having been through as a spectator, someone in the room with other people having babies, I know that it doesn't always go the way you plan it to go. So it's like, some people are like, oh, you can't just say, I want me and my baby to make it out alive. But in reality, that is the only thing that matters. Because it's like, yes, you can have this. I want to have this music playing. I want to be here. I want this person to be in there. And I want to have, your water could break at 32 weeks. And all of that stuff is out the window. And so I tried to set my expectations for what that looked like a little bit low, so that way I wouldn't be as devastated if it did not go the way that I wanted it to. Yeah. Which, and like I said, I ended up having to have a C-section. I always knew that could be a possibility for any, whether I was giving birth at a birth center and needed a transfer, or if I was in a hospital, I knew that was always a possibility, but I didn't want it. And especially in the way that it happened. Right. So it's like, it really did. It threw me fully for a loop. Like it's tough. And it's tough to look back and be excited about his birth because it was so scary. So, and that's what it is. Like, for me, it's not that, like, I don't even know what the word is, he is amazing. It's a miracle that he's here, but there is this underlying, thing that just kind of taints it. And I hate that. I hate that I didn't get those same feelings with Ben as I did with Theo. So it's tough. It's tough.
You're amazing though.
Thank you.
And I love you.
I love you too.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like it's just so hard for us as humans to wrap our minds around, again, how something can be so common and it can happen all day, every day, but also there is zero control over it.
Yep.
Whether you're a doctor, a midwife, a mom, it literally doesn't matter. I mean, there's just...
And you think how many...
Zero control.
Yeah. How many people are giving birth and there's no two stories that are exactly the same. No two stories. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just...
Yeah. Like, my version of your birth is different than yours. And yours is different from Eric's. And Eric's is different from your doctor's. And, like, I mean, we all see your birth through different lenses. And we all have different perspectives.
Yep. Yeah. So, definitely we have covered all of the things when it comes to labor and delivery.
Yeah. I mean, you have an epic story and I love it. Like,
thank you.
Everybody's stories are so different.